Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first ever 100 Sisters on Security, where our guests speak on different areas of human security and defense as it pertains to and impacts women. We are brought to you by the Ontario chapter of the G100 Security and Defense Wing, and I'm Alison Lamb, the Ontario chair. Before we begin, I'd like to invite everyone to take a moment to consider the traditional lands they're on. I am currently on Treaty 13 lands. They're the territories traditionally stewarded by the Wendat peoples, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Canada's National Truth and Reconciliation Day was only a couple of weeks ago, but the work of reconciliation is ongoing. As a settler here in Canada, I have always felt that it is my duty and responsibility, not to mention my honor, to learn what it takes to be a good ally. And I'm very grateful that I have been influenced by many Indigenous teachers and elders who have been kind enough to share with me their wisdom, traditional knowledge, and history along the way. One such person is today's guest, who has been invaluable in helping me to better understand what I can do to raise awareness and support Indigenous communities. Rainbow Eyes is a guardian of the Danukta First Nation and a graduate of Vancouver Island University First Nations Stewardship Technical Training Program. She is a forest defender who has worked to protect lands, waters, wildlife, and Indigenous culture for future generations. She also defends Indigenous values in her advocacy work and will be speaking to us today on her experience with the Canadian legal system. Welcome, Rainbow Eyes. Thank you so much for coming.
Gayla Kessler, thank you for having me, Alison. I'm honored to be here and talk with you today.
Thank you. So let's begin with some of the questions that we have, because I'm just so excited to hear you speak on these things. First of all, you are a critical voice in addressing the climate crisis and were very recently involved in a case brought on by Teal Jones regarding Fairy Creek and the protection of the sacred old growth. Can you give us more detail on what that was about, including some background on what exactly happened at Fairy Creek?
Well, there's currently two big cases that we're involved with. Is my personal case. I was part of Canada's largest act of civil disobedience with over 1,000 arrests. So many people were arrested. So I'm going through my personal trial with my 5 arrests that I had. And there's also a second major case that's going on with 15 individuals from Fairy Creek and Teal Jones industry. The 15 individuals includes Elder Bill Jones of the Pacheedaht First Nation, who was our elder and leader at Fairy Creek. We are being sued by Teal Jones for an open amount. So like 10 million, 20 million, the amount is open. So that's one of the cases that are going on right now. And then, my case with my 5 arrests for breaching the injunction. Teal Jones had an injunction from the Supreme Court of Canada to keep all peaceful protesters out of Fairy Creek on the Pacheedaht First Nation. But in the injunction, Teal Jones has it that it's a tree license. So it's a TFL. This is the colonial court system. They keep it very separated. So the injunction said that it was Teal Jones TFL. But many of us kept going back because we were heeding the call of Elder Bill Jones to help protect the sacred old growth on his territory. So this is where we have 2 laws that we're meant to follow. Our natural Indigenous laws, which we, are here. It's in our DNA to protect Mother Earth, and this is what we're doing. But we also have this colonial law that the colonial court system wants us to follow. But what we're trying to do in the court system right now is, with my case and many others across Turtle Island, we're arguing the fact that Indigenous and natural laws are actually a higher umbrella than the colonial law system. We will always follow in our ancestors' footsteps and follow our natural and colonial laws. So it's a big fight that we're up against, and it's so good that we're all doing it together, but it's slow and it's painful and it's tiring, and It's brutal, but once we get on this path that we're on, to protect Mother Earth and follow in the steps of our ancestors and work so hard for the next 7 generations, it's the fire comes from our own bellies, and we just there's no better work that we found, and we're making progress, big progress.
That was actually going to be my follow-up question about the progress that you feel you're making, because I mean, the sacred old growth is beautiful and it definitely deserves to be protected, and there's so many of you that are putting yourselves out there just to protect against the logging, and I know that a lot of there's also already been a lot of damage done to that old growth, and the fact that you're putting yourselves out there just to protect what's left of it is amazing. And you do feel like that there has been progress?
Absolutely. They're cutting trees down in the area around Fairy Creek, in the area that many called home. Beautiful old growth. They're taking down. There are deferral areas, and we know for a fact, Stand Earth has called them out, that in deferred areas, there is still logging. So the government has deferred certain areas not to be logged, and there's like an app you can go on and actually see that industry is logging in deferred areas to get the old growth. So we're up against a huge fight, because the system is corrupt, because industry is allowed to go in and there's no repercussions for them because it's a business, and it has been. It's an age-old business. Elder Bill Jones says this. He says, we have been on this path that we are on since the time of Alexander the Great. He's like, he knows it. This is one of the stories he tells. And it is up to us now to have the courage to change the path of humanity. It's huge. But Elder Bill says, this is what we're doing. So for our charge, the lawsuit with Teal Jones, the $20 million lawsuit, we are charged with conspiracy. This is the charge, a conspiracy to set up the blockade. But what Elder Bill has turned it into, he has said, yeah, it is a conspiracy, but it's a conspiracy of love. And that's what we're doing. And this is the work. And when we were out in the forest, it was magical. And it was unlike anything we've ever experienced before. And that's the reason why we're doing it, to realize that that was normal. The life that we lived in the forest together as a community, working together. We had our differences, people butted heads, but it was magic. That was normal. And the way that we live right now in Western culture is not normal. This division, this separate lives, individual life, materialism, that's not right. And we're learning, and we're starting to share what we've learned, and it's slow. But yeah, we're moving forward in such a good way.
Thank you so much for that. That was just beautiful, the way that you described it. Working together, collaborating, working as a community. That was fantastic.
I like to describe it like, it's like seeing a new color. That's what Fairy Creek was like. It was life like we've never experienced before, and it was like seeing a new color. It's a possibility, and we're dreaming about it now. The ancestors are talking to us in our dreams, and we're listening.
So it's really interesting what you mentioned about how you're up against big corporations and they're powerful, and it's just such a challenge. As I mentioned in the introduction, we recently recognized our third annual National Truth and Reconciliation Day, although many of us have recognized it unofficially for years before as Orange Shirt Day. Although the work is continuous and will never truly be done, do you feel that we're on the right path to truth and reconciliation?
Currently, I think we are, like, me and you, and like people out at Fairy Creek, people that are on this path, people that feel that they know change must happen, but the system isn't. The system will never be. And if it it will never happen. That's just not the way it's built. So we have to figure out a way to change it now. And people are. We're so grateful that so many people are waking up to the fact that things need to change. But the system will not change unless we make it change.
And that's quite the fight, isn't it? Because individuals, like you said, individuals try to do what they can, and they do come together and they are collaborating, like as you mentioned at Fairy Creek, to work together to try to change the system. But at the end of the day, they're the ones that are colonial, they're the ones that are over top, and it's just kind of hard to push back for that, especially since they have their own colonial laws. And as you were mentioning, they weren't even following their own colonial laws. They were logging despite the deferrals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the colonial system will always protect industry, money. There will always be those people. We're learning that. So we have to do it differently than we ever have before, because we're going to come across people who think differently. So to work together and really be the Rainbow Nation, will have to work and try to be together in a different way than we ever have in humanity. I know that what's going on in Australia right now is really interesting, and how they're moving forward with their legislature, with the Vote Yes campaign. I love it so much. We have to see more of that. There's a lot of misinformation happening, I know, in Australia now with that campaign. And I think really that is the issue that we see, is people don't have all the information. So they believe it's an old way of thinking, and we have to just bring in all the information we can to inform people of what's really going on, because the media doesn't tell them. The media is controlled. We see it even more evident today with the world events that we see all around the world.
Yeah. Well, as you were saying about the system and how the system isn't really on the right path to truth and reconciliation, that's interesting, because Wab Kinew was recently elected as the first provincial premier of First Nations descent in Manitoba, and is only the second Indigenous premier since John Norkie back in 1887. And then Mary Simon was appointed the first Indigenous Governor General, representative of the British monarchy here in Canada. What are your thoughts on these pivotal political roles being held by people of Indigenous descent? And what do these historic elections and appointments mean for Indigenous nations?
I think it's huge. Yeah, the election of Bob was so powerful, and he speaks so well. And it's just getting a message out and not being distracted by everything else that comes at you. He's someone to learn from, and that we look up to as well. And Mary as well. I think any Indigenous person in power, in a position of leadership, or is a step. It's something that our world needs. The Indigenous voice is important. And I think of Remy, who also sits on IPAC, the Green Party's Indigenous Peoples Advisory Circle. He always says that the Indigenous people, we won't tell the system what to do. We're here to guide. So it's an important point to remember that the Indigenous voice is here because, or not because, but to guide, and from a good place and from a good heart, connected to the ancestors, connected to Mother Earth. And the Indigenous people are known to be a community and to work together. So this is the basis of Indigenous culture all around the world. And this is something that the Western culture has tried to destroy. And this is something that even for Indigenous people, even for all across Turtle Island. So to go back to that way of guidance is so necessary, key. It's the crux of what we need to do in our times right now, is to go back to that heart-centered way of living, and that will come through the Indigenous voices. That's what should come through the Indigenous voices for us.
Mhm. And I think it's wonderful that there are these Indigenous voices now in that system, in that colonial system. The premier was elected. Mary Simon was appointed. That there is that difference there, and not to take anything away from Mary Simon, because she's a wonderful, powerful woman to be able to take on this role. And I think that she has been a wonderful guiding point. I do want to ask how you feel about the fact that the government appointed her in this particular role.
I would hope that I think it's good that she was appointed, absolutely. And I think any Indigenous person appointed into the role as a Governor General would hopefully be guided, like I said, by their own culture and own connection to the land that they live on, the respect for Mother Earth. And we have a word in Kwakwala, Mayahala, and it's respect for self and respect for each other. And this is a main teaching life lesson. And I would hope that, especially in the position of Governor General, such a big place in our Canadian system, that I feel and I know that as an Indigenous person, they would feel this connection, and that would guide them.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And you're right. At the end of the day, these the indigenous background, the heritage would come through, and they would be incredible guides to the rest of Canada.
Yeah, and I say that because I think it's very important because right now in Canada and in Turtle Island, we have so many people that work and believe so much in truth and reconciliation. I believe it. So we have to make sure, as Indigenous people, the Indigenous people all across Turtle Island and all around the world, take the responsibility of the ancestors and in walking a good path and using their voice in a good way. Because right now, the world, we know, is hungry for the culture, this connection, and it's a responsibility to use it and go in a good way. That's what's most important, and not to use it in a way that would be misleading or divisive, which happens. So it's so important that we as Indigenous people are really careful and make sure that the work that we do is unifying, not even unifying, but just honest. And yeah, that would make our ancestors proud.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So one of Wabkinu's promises is to search Prairie Green landfill for the remains of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Mirren, two Indigenous women believed to have been killed. Their families have been calling for the search for almost a year, and yet it has taken this long for true progress. This has undoubtedly been a very frustrating experience for the families as well as the First Nations community. Can you speak a little bit more on that?
Yeah, it's really been unbelievable to watch. And we have friends that went out to the blockade in Manitoba there. And we actually thought about going out there for a little while to support, to be with our brothers and sisters out there, because it is important, because it needs to be talked about, and it needs to, the truth needs to be brought to light as well. And it's the old ideas. We've come across people that have, I don't know how to say this, people with old ideas and think poorly on the Indigenous people. And it's a group of people that perpetuate this all across, Canada and the States and South America and all around the world. It's an old way of thinking. It's the old path. It's the path of working for me. This isn't your land. This is my land. It's this old way of thinking. I'm gonna provide for my family. I don't need to provide for yours. It's the people that don't understand the whole story, because that's the way that they've been taught, that perpetuates this misunderstanding and this hate and towards this whole situation. And unfortunately, we still come across people like that that don't understand. And all we have to figure out a way to talk to them and inform people with the right information, because it is so important that people understand and learn from the past, so this stops. It stops, right? It stops now. It stops with us.
Well, Indigenous peoples have a very beautiful understanding of the relationship with the land, whereas Western society has more of an idea of privatization and ownership. This is my land, and you shouldn't be on it. You can get your own land. And I think that is one of the challenges that are faced too, because the whole idea of sharing, community, collaboration is a little bit more lacking in the Western society than it is among Indigenous peoples.
Yeah, it's right. And another thing Elder Bill is saying recently that just I love so much is he says that even at Fairy Creek, we had people that, I don't know, the people that, I guess people everywhere that have different ideas about things. He said it would be so healing for everybody to work from the land and to receive from the land. We've lost our connection from the land, and just even working on the land, growing food on the land is so incredibly healing and connecting. And that's something that none of us do anymore. Myself, or we don't grow our own food, but to do that, Elder Bill was saying, is what's missing. And even with the division that we have everywhere in all groups, we're finding the harder we work for the Rainbow Nation, the more division we come across, it seems. But he said that the divisiveness it would help if people just connected with the land. It's so profound.
Mhm. Well, Morgan Harris and Mercedes Mirren are just two of a disproportionate number of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, one of the most tragic and horrific sides of Canada. For the period from 2015 to 2020, the average homicide rate involving Indigenous victims was 6 times higher than the homicide rate involving non-Indigenous victims. Can you please tell us a little more about this and what non-Indigenous people can do to support and perhaps be considered as allies?
Mhm, mhm. I think, like I said, it's the people that no. I think this is a result of a broken culture, a disconnection from love, a disconnection from family is the result of this, that this would happen. And it's a direct result of colonization, unfortunately, that so many of our sisters and brothers have been lost in this way. It's a tragedy, and I hope that the Canadian government can step up and, like in Manitoba, to help heal this. And I think people can learn more about this and become more aware of the situation and begin to support and offer help in any way that they can. The connection and knowing that people are out there is so important to the family of the missing and murdered, and to the women as well as men who feel like, they don't fit in and they don't have a place in society, and which may lead them on a path that they shouldn't take, that will so support community and love is the hard thing for our Western culture, but it will hopefully help in this situation it is so difficult and touches so many. But I am grateful that people, so many people, including Wob, are out there to raise awareness and do it in such a good way, and give good information. And yeah, it's at the forefront of what we're doing right now, is just raising this awareness.
Well, that's all our questions for today. Did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to share with our audience?
Yeah. I think a big message that is coming through right now is has been for a while, is our ancestors are there for us if we tune into them to help. The phases of the moon are so powerful right now. We're coming up to the new moon on Saturday, and it's also going to be a solar eclipse. So to gather, especially as women, is so important right now. It's so important to share ideas, be inspired, so we can continue to do this really important work that we were born here now to do. And I think many of us know that the work needs to be done now. We're at a tipping point, and if we haven't passed it already, we're getting close to it. so many people know this so deep in their being. So the work that we're doing now is so important. So yeah, thank you as well, Allison, for the work that you do. You are also an inspiration of mine. You do so much within the Green Party. You do so much. It's an inspiration. So I'm so grateful to be able to talk with you about this. I really thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Rainbow Eyes, for sharing your thoughts and giving us this opportunity to learn from your experience. This has been an incredible way to launch 100 Sisters on Security, and I hope that our viewers will join us for our next edition. Thank you so much.
Thank you.